I recorded my own son planning my funeral while I was still alive. My name is Maggie. I'm 64 years old, and 3 weeks ago I became invisible in my own home. Picture this. You're sitting at your dinner table, surrounded by your children and grandchildren, but every conversation flows around you like you're not even there. That's exactly what happened to me the night my son Dylan invited the whole family over for what I thought was comfort after losing Walter, my husband of 42 years. Instead, I watched my family discuss my future like I was already gone. Dylan leaned forward with that patronizing smile and said, "Mom, just let us handle the paperwork. You don't have to worry about anything." Meanwhile, my daughter-in-law Megan was taking mental inventory of everything in my house, and my own daughter Heather couldn't even look me in the eye. But here's what they didn't know. Walter had prepared for this moment. As I sat there feeling like a ghost in my own life, I quietly slipped his old brown notebook from the bookshelf. Nobody noticed. In that moment, I made myself a promise. I would find my voice again, even if it meant starting by listening to the silence around me. The days following that dinner felt like living in a house made of glass. Everything looked the same, but I could feel the cracks spreading everywhere. I moved through rooms that had been my sanctuary for decades, but now I felt like an intruder in my own life. The signs were subtle at first. Dylan would drop by to check on things, but his eyes would scan the rooms, mentally cataloging items. He'd open drawers under the pretense of looking for something, then close them just a little too carefully. Megan started accompanying him on these visits, always with that sweet smile that never quite reached her eyes. She'd whisper phone conversations that would abruptly end when I entered the room. Even Heather, who had always been my emotional anchor, began acting differently. She'd visit with forced cheerfulness, but there was something brittle about her demeanor. She'd ask probing questions about my finances, my health, my plans, all wrapped in daughterly concern that felt somehow hollow. The breaking point came when I overheard a family meeting that I wasn't invited to. They were discussing Walter's bakery, our home, even my jewelry collection, as if I had already passed away. The casual way they divided up my life while I was still living it was more devastating than losing Walter himself. That night, alone in my bedroom, I opened Walter's notebook with trembling hands. At first, I thought my grief was playing tricks on me. Every page was covered in his handwriting, but written backwards, like mirror writing. Then I remembered Walter's love for puzzles and word games, especially the secret codes he used to share with our granddaughter, Sophie. I called Sophie into my room the next morning. Her 16-year-old eyes lit up when I showed her the notebook. "Grandpa's mirror code?" she whispered excitedly. "He taught me this when I was little. Want me to help you read it, Grandma?" Together, we held a small hand mirror up to the first page. The backwards letters transformed into clear words. "If you're reading this, they're already circling. Look in the music box. Trust only Sophie." My heart pounded as I realized Walter had seen this coming. He'd prepared for a battle I didn't even know was brewing. The next morning arrived with a deceptive calm, like the quiet before a storm. I was still processing Walter's hidden message when Heather sent me a text that made my blood run cold. "Mom, can you gather all your important papers? Dylan needs them for the lawyer appointment this afternoon." "What lawyer? I'd never agreed to meet with any lawyer." Within an hour, Dylan and Megan arrived at my door, carrying leather portfolios and wearing expressions of false concern. They settled themselves at my kitchen table like they owned the place, which I was beginning to realize they thought they did. "We've arranged everything, Mom," Dylan said, his voice dripping with that condescending sweetness that had become his trademark. "This lawyer specializes in estate planning for widows. He'll help make sure everything is protected. Megan spread documents across the table with practiced efficiency. Powers of attorney, trust transfers, property deeds, all requiring my signature. As she poured tea with one hand, she kept up a steady stream of manipulation disguised as care. "It's really for the best, Maggie," she cooed, never making direct eye contact. "You shouldn't have to deal with all this stress during your grieving period. We'll handle everything so you can focus on healing." I picked up the first document, pretending to read while my mind raced. The legal language was dense, but I caught enough to understand what was happening. They were trying to transfer everything, the house, the bakery, Walter's savings, even my personal accounts, into a trust controlled by Dylan and Megan. Heather hovered nearby, wringing her hands. I could see the conflict in her eyes, but she'd already chosen her side. She'd rather be complicit than confrontational. "I need my reading glasses," I said, playing the confused elderly woman they apparently thought I was. "Let me go get them." In my bedroom, I found the music box Walter had mentioned. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was a small silver key and another note in mirror writing. When I held it up to the mirror, it read, "Safety Deposit Box, 247, Bank of Prairie. Sophie knows the way." I returned to the kitchen, continuing my performance of bewildered cooperation. But as I fumbled with the papers, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. Megan slipped something into Sophie's backpack while she thought no one was looking. After they left, extracting promises that I'd think about signing the documents, I asked Sophie to empty her backpack. Among her school supplies, we found a manila envelope containing forged documents, crude copies of the papers they'd just shown me, but with my signature already forged. "They're setting us up," Sophie whispered, her young face pale with understanding. "If anything goes wrong, they'll blame us for forgery." That evening, the school called. The hallway security cameras had captured Megan placing something in Sophie's backpack during her visit to pick up her own daughter. The footage was clear and damning. I sat in Walter's chair that night, holding his notebook and feeling the weight of betrayal settle around me like a shroud. My own children were treating me like an obstacle to be removed, a problem to be solved. They'd turned my grief into their opportunity and my love into their weapon. But Walter's final message in the notebook gave me something I'd lost in the week since his death: hope. Written in his careful mirror script, it read, "They think your silence means surrender. Let them keep thinking that. The strongest battles are fought in whispers, not screams." I picked up my own pen and wrote in the margin, "The war begins now." What they didn't understand was that 42 years of marriage had taught me something valuable about strategy. Sometimes the most powerful move is the one your opponent never sees coming. They thought they were hunting a grieving widow. They had no idea they were about to face a warrior who'd been underestimated her entire life. The next morning, I would begin fighting back, but tonight, I would let them think they were winning. The transformation began at dawn. While my family slept, believing they had me cornered, I was already 3 moves ahead. Walter's notebook had become my battle plan, and Sophie had become my most trusted ally. Over the following week, I watched my house turn into a battlefield where every conversation was a skirmish and every smile was a weapon. Dylan and Megan grew bolder, staying later during their visits, taking photographs of furniture and artwork under the guise of helping me organize. They moved through my home like prospective buyers, measuring spaces and discussing renovations they planned to make. One morning, I pretended to nap in the living room while they argued in the kitchen about cracking the safe. Walter's old safe had sat quietly under our bed for years, holding what they assumed were the keys to our fortune. Their desperation to access it was almost palpable. "If we can't get the combination, we'll have to drill it," Dylan said, his voice carrying a hardness I'd never heard before. "No," Megan hissed. "That looks suspicious. We need her to open it willingly, or we need to find another way." But they didn't know about the real safe, the one Walter had installed behind a false wall in the basement, the one that contained documents that would change everything. Sophie and I continued our secret meetings, decoding more of Walter's messages. Each revelation painted a clearer picture of just how far the conspiracy reached. One message read, "The real treasure isn't gold or money. It's knowing who stands with you when everything else falls apart." Another revealed something that made my blood run cold. "Megan has been researching elder abuse laws. She's planning to have you declared incompetent." The pieces were falling into place. The lawyer they'd mentioned, the documents they wanted me to sign, the way they'd been recording my confused moments. It was all part of a calculated campaign to strip me of my legal rights. But I wasn't the helpless widow they thought I was. 42 years of managing the bakery's books had taught me about finances, contracts, and legal documents. I knew exactly what they were trying to do, and I had been quietly building my own case. I started carrying a small recording device, capturing their conversations about dividing my assets. I photographed every document they brought me, every contract they wanted me to sign. Most importantly, I reached out to people they didn't know about: Walter's lawyer, our financial advisor, even the police detective who had investigated Walter's death. The school incident with Sophie's backpack had given me leverage I hadn't expected. The security footage was clear evidence of Megan's deception, but more importantly, it established a pattern of manipulation that would be crucial later. Heather's behavior became increasingly erratic as the pressure mounted. She'd arrive at my house with tear-stained cheeks and leave with red-rimmed eyes, caught between her loyalty to me and her fear of being excluded from Dylan's plans. She started posting on social media about the challenges of caring for an aging parent, fishing for sympathy, while building a public narrative that painted me as increasingly dependent and confused. One evening, as I sat in Walter's chair reading his notebook, I found a message that made me smile for the first time in weeks. "Remember the cardinal rule of chess, my love. Never let your opponent see your real strategy until it's too late to counter it." That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I called Walter's lawyer, Harold Morrison, who had been our friend for over 20 years. I arranged to meet him the next morning, away from the house, away from prying eyes. "Harold," I said when we met at the small cafe downtown, "I need your help. But first, I need you to promise me something. Everything I tell you stays between us until I give you permission to act." His weathered face grew serious as I laid out everything I'd discovered. The forged documents, the recordings, the security footage, the pattern of manipulation and financial abuse. When I finished, he sat back in his chair and whistled softly. "Maggie," he said quietly, "they've made a very serious mistake. They assumed you were vulnerable. But what they've actually done is commit several felonies. The game was about to change completely, and they had no idea what was coming. The war escalated quickly once I stopped pretending to be helpless. Dylan and Megan, sensing that their window of opportunity was closing, began making increasingly desperate moves. They started visiting daily, sometimes twice a day, always with new documents, new emergencies that required my immediate signature. "Mom, the bank is asking questions about Dad's accounts," Dylan would say, his voice urgent with manufactured crisis. "We need to get everything transferred today, or there might be problems with taxes. But I had already spoken to the bank. There were no problems with taxes. There were no urgent transfers needed. Every crisis they presented was fiction, designed to pressure me into signing away my rights. Megan's approach was more subtle but equally manipulative. She'd arrive with baked goods and concerned smiles, settling in for what she called heart-to-heart chats that were actually interrogation sessions disguised as sympathy. "You know, Maggie, I've been thinking about your future," she'd say while serving coffee in my own kitchen. "Living alone in this big house, managing all these responsibilities. It's really too much for someone your age." What she didn't know was that I was recording every word. The breakthrough came when Heather made a critical error. Desperate to prove her loyalty to Dylan's cause while easing her own guilt, she began posting videos on social media showing me in what she portrayed as confused moments. Videos of me talking to Walter's photograph, reading his notebook, even singing old songs to myself. Her Facebook post went viral in our small community. "When your mom starts losing her mind, you lose your heart. Please pray for our family as we navigate this difficult time." The comments poured in, neighbors offering sympathy, friends sharing their own stories of aging parents, strangers providing advice about memory care facilities. But buried in the flood of well-meaning responses, someone noticed something crucial. Margaret Fletcher, a retired teacher who had known Walter, commented, "Isn't that mirror writing in the notebook? My husband used to do that. It's not a sign of confusion. It's a puzzle technique. Very sophisticated, actually." More observant comments followed. People began questioning the narrative Heather was building. Former customers of Walter's bakery chimed in, with memories of his clever word games and puzzles. The story began to shift from confused widow to maybe something else is going on here. Meanwhile, Dylan and Megan finally managed to locate what they thought was the key to Walter's safe. They found it exactly where Walter had wanted them to find it, in an obvious hiding place that practically screamed, "Look here." Their excitement was palpable as they worked to open the safe, certain they were about to discover the secrets to Walter's financial empire. The safe opened easily. Inside, they found exactly what Walter had left for them: a single photograph of himself smiling, and a note written in plain English. "If you're reading this, you've already lost the game. Love, Walter." Their frustration was immediate and explosive. Megan accused me of hiding the real safe, of playing games with the family's financial security. Dylan became increasingly aggressive, his mask of concern slipping to reveal the greed underneath. "We know you're hiding something," he said during one particularly heated confrontation. "Dad wouldn't have left you with nothing. Where are the real documents?" But I maintained my performance of confused cooperation, even as I documented every threat, every moment of intimidation, every glimpse of their true intentions. The turning point came when Sophie, my teenage ally, made a discovery that changed everything. While helping me organize Walter's papers, she found a small key taped to the inside of an old cookbook. The key was labeled with an address, not a bank, but a storage facility across town. "Grandma," she whispered, her eyes wide with excitement. "I think Grandpa left us a real treasure hunt." That evening, as I sat in the gathering darkness of my living room, I realized the game had evolved beyond simple financial manipulation. This had become a battle for the soul of my family, a test of who we really were when everything was at stake. Heather's videos had backfired, creating public scrutiny instead of sympathy. Dylan and Megan's increasing desperation was making them careless, prone to mistakes that would eventually destroy them. And Walter's final gifts were still revealing themselves, one clue at a time. The end game was approaching, and I was ready for it. The final confrontation was inevitable, but I chose the time and place. After weeks of being reactive, of defending myself against their attacks, I decided to go on the offensive. I sent a simple text to Dylan, Megan, and Heather. Family meeting tomorrow at 2 p.m. Everyone needs to be here. It's time to settle everything. The storage facility key had led Sophie and me to a revelation that changed everything. Walter hadn't just anticipated their betrayal, he had documented it. The storage unit contained months of evidence, recorded phone calls, photographs, financial records, and a detailed timeline of every suspicious interaction he'd witnessed before his death. But the most devastating discovery was a medical report that Walter had hidden from everyone, including me. His death hadn't been the sudden heart attack we'd all believed. The report showed signs of gradual poisoning, specifically digitalis toxicity that could have been administered over months through his heart medication. Walter had known he was being murdered, and he had methodically collected evidence of his own killing. The meeting began exactly as I had planned. Dylan arrived first, confident and controlling, setting up his laptop as if he were running a business presentation. Megan followed, carrying her usual arsenal of fake sympathy and manipulative charm. Heather came last, her face already showing the strain of guilt and fear. I sat in Walter's chair, his notebook in my lap, Sophie beside me. Harold Morrison, our lawyer, sat quietly in the corner, taking notes. "Before we begin," I said, my voice steady and clear, "I want everyone to know that this conversation is being recorded and Mr. Morrison is here as a witness to whatever decisions we make today." Dylan's confidence faltered slightly. "Mom, I don't think we need lawyers for a family discussion." "We do when the family discussion involves forged documents and attempted murder," I replied calmly. The room went silent. Megan's face went pale, and Heather gasped audibly. I opened Walter's notebook and began reading from his final entries, written in plain English. "Megan has been replacing my heart medication with higher doses. She thinks I don't notice the taste difference, but I've been documenting everything. Dylan doesn't know. He thinks he's just helping with a financial plan. But Megan is playing a much longer game." Megan shot to her feet. "That's ridiculous. Walter had a heart condition. Everyone knows that." "Everyone knows what you wanted them to know," I continued. "But Walter was smarter than you gave him credit for. He had his medication tested. He documented every symptom. He even recorded some of your conversations about speeding up the timeline." I nodded to Harold, who produced a small recording device. Walter's voice filled the room, weak but determined. "If something happens to me, make sure Maggie knows it wasn't natural. Make sure she knows they're coming for her next." Dylan's face had gone from confident to confused to horrified. "Megan, what is she talking about? You said Dad's medication was prescribed by his doctor." "It was," Megan protested, but her voice was shrill with panic. "This is all fantasy, confusion, grief-induced paranoia." "Then explain this," Sophie said quietly, producing a pill bottle from her backpack. "Grandpa asked me to keep this safe. It's the medication Megan was giving him, next to the medication the doctor actually prescribed. We had them both tested. The lab results were damning. The pills Megan had been providing contained nearly 3 times the prescribed dosage of digitalis, enough to cause the gradual heart failure that had ultimately killed Walter." Heather began crying. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I thought we were just trying to help Mom with her finances." I didn't know anyone was trying to hurt Dad. But you were willing to have me declared incompetent, I said, my voice harder now. You were willing to take away my rights, my home, my dignity. You were willing to erase me from my own life. Dylan stood up slowly, his face a mask of devastation and rage. Megan, tell me this isn't true. Tell me you didn't kill my father. But Megan was already backing toward the door, her mask finally slipping completely. You're all crazy, she snarled. You can't prove anything. It's all speculation and grief-induced paranoia. Actually, Harold said quietly, we can prove quite a lot. The police have been investigating Walter's death for weeks, ever since Mrs. Morrison brought them the evidence. They're waiting outside. The sound of car doors slamming and footsteps on the porch confirmed his words. The reckoning had arrived. The moment the police entered my living room, everything that had been building for months finally exploded into the open. Detective Sarah Chen, who had been quietly investigating Walter's death based on the evidence I'd provided, stepped forward with a warrant for Megan's arrest. Megan Walsh, you're under arrest for the murder of Walter Morrison and conspiracy to commit elder abuse, Detective Chen announced, her voice cutting through the chaos that had erupted in my living room. Megan's final performance was perhaps her most desperate. She turned to Dylan with tears streaming down her face, playing the victim one last time. Baby, you have to believe me. I loved your father. I would never hurt him. They're just trying to frame me because they don't want to share the inheritance. But Dylan's eyes had gone cold. The man who had spent months pressuring me to sign away my rights, who had invaded my home and treated me like an inconvenience, was finally seeing the truth about the woman he'd married. The insurance policy, he said slowly, his voice hollow with realization. The one you convinced me to help Dad update. You made yourself the beneficiary. That was for you, Megan protested as the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. For us. For our future. No, Dylan said, stepping away from her. It was for you. It was always for you. As the police led Megan away, she turned back one final time, her mask of sweetness completely gone. This isn't over, Maggie. You think you've won, but you have no idea what's coming. The silence that followed her exit was deafening. Dylan collapsed into a chair, his face in his hands. Heather sat frozen, staring at the space where Megan had stood. Sophie squeezed my hand, her young face showing a mixture of relief and trauma. Harold cleared his throat gently. There's more we need to discuss, he said. Walter's real will. I had been dreading this moment as much as I'd been anticipating it. Walter's actual will, the one he'd hidden in the storage facility, was very different from the documents Dylan and Megan had been so desperate to manipulate. Walter knew this day would come, Harold continued. He wrote 2 wills. The public one, which left everything to you, Maggie, as expected. But he also wrote a private codicil, with very specific instructions for what should happen if anyone in the family tried to take advantage of your grief. Dylan looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. What does that mean? Harold opened the sealed envelope Walter had left in his care. It means that anyone who participated in attempts to defraud or manipulate Maggie forfeits their inheritance completely. Walter was very specific about this. He wanted to protect you from people who would prey on your grief, even if those people were family. The weight of those words settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Dylan's face crumpled as he realized what he'd lost. Not just his inheritance, but his relationship with his father, his marriage, and potentially his relationship with me. Mom, he whispered, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. I got caught up in Megan's plans, and I lost sight of what really mattered. I became someone I don't recognize." Heather finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I posted those videos. I made you look confused and helpless to thousands of people. I humiliated you publicly because I was scared of being left out. For the first time in months, I felt something other than anger or fear. I felt the deep, complex pain of a mother watching her children confront the consequences of their choices. The question now," I said quietly, "is what we do next." Walter's will was designed to protect me, but it was also designed to teach you something about the difference between love and greed. Sophie, who had been silent through most of the revelation, finally spoke up. "Grandpa's last message," she said softly. "The one we decoded yesterday. He said family isn't about blood or money. It's about who stands with you when everything else falls apart." I looked around the room at what remained of my family. Dylan, broken and remorseful. Heather, ashamed but present. Sophie, young but wise beyond her years. And Walter, gone but somehow still guiding us toward healing. "The inheritance can be rebuilt," I said finally. "Trust takes much longer, but if you're willing to do the work, we can start today." The breaking point had passed. Now came the harder work of putting the pieces back together. 6 months later, I stood in the morning light streaming through the bakery windows, watching Sophie arrange fresh pastries in the display case. The rhythm of the work was soothing, familiar, and hopeful. Dylan had moved back to town after his divorce was finalized. He spent his days helping to rebuild the bakery and his evenings in therapy, working through the guilt and manipulation that had nearly destroyed our family. He was a different man now, quieter, more thoughtful, quicker to listen than to speak. Heather had taken down all her social media posts about my confusion and published a public apology that went viral in its own right. She'd started volunteering at the senior center, working with families dealing with elder abuse. Her shame had transformed into purpose. Megan was serving a 15-year sentence for murder and elder abuse. The insurance money she'd killed Walter to obtain was donated to organizations that protect vulnerable seniors. She'd gotten nothing but a prison cell, and the knowledge that her betrayal had ultimately brought our family closer together. The bakery walls now displayed a new sign: the Silent Strength Foundation, supporting families through crisis. We'd turned our pain into purpose, our betrayal into a bridge to help others facing similar struggles. Walter's notebook sat in a place of honor on the counter, open to his final message: "Love is not silent when silence would cause harm. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is speak up, even when your voice shakes." Every morning, I touched that page and remembered that grief had nearly broken me, but it had also revealed who I truly was. Not the invisible woman my family had tried to erase, but a survivor who had found her voice by first learning to trust the silence. The scars remained, but they no longer defined us. They had become the map that led us home to each other. If you're watching this and you feel invisible in your own life, remember, your silence doesn't mean surrender. Sometimes it means you're gathering strength for the battle ahead. Trust your instincts, document everything, and never underestimate the power of a grandmother who's tired of being underestimated. The war is over, the healing has begun, and sometimes that's the most powerful victory of all.